maybe just following the first conversations on whether the U.S. is withdrawing from the region, I'd say there is a clear pattern since the Bush administration of retrenching from the Middle East, or at least revising or changing this transformative vision that the United States had for the Middle East, including whether it be democratization, state building, nation building. In that sense, we see that retrenchment, a continuation from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. So the Trump administration here is not an anomaly. It's a continuation of the retrenchment policies of the Obama administration. But what's important to keep in mind are the ambiguities and the contradictions that this shift in US policy can potentially create. Ambiguities for the role of extra-regional powers in the region, such as Russia, the EU. What if the US is with minimizing or becoming more pragmatic in its decision-making vis-a-vis the region? So what legitimate or proper role can extra-regional powers, such as the EU or Russia, have? Here, the US is ambiguous and vacillates at times on its positions. And second, US relations with traditional allies, particularly Saudi Arabia and Turkey, where we do see those tensions and vacillations and ambiguities. But where the particular strategic contradiction in US foreign policy can be seen is on its Iran policy. And that's the current issue under the Trump administration. So a strategic contradiction under the Trump administration of how you can retrench or be more pragmatic, cost-effective in your Middle East policy, but at the same time want to pull out of the Iran deal, want to ostracize Iran, or create an anti-Iran coalition in the region to push back against Iran. But in order to first explain why the problems that may pose for the region, we have to understand why President Obama had a new shift in policy towards Iran. And that new shift in policy that President Obama had in Iran basically comes about in reaction to failures of American policy in containing Iran and for undertaking regime change in Iran. So that type of pragmatism that set into the US administration's thinking led to, and it's reflective of President Obama's broader mindset of how to negotiate with adversaries. It's not the axis of evil approach. You actually sit down and you speak with adversaries. You undertake diplomacy, with the Iranian nuclear deal being a diplomatic outreach effort and solution through a multilateral framework of basically, focusing first on Iran's nuclear program and the potential weaponization of the program to remove that, the strategic challenge that the US viewed coming from Iran, and then with the hopes of potentially building on that and then focusing on other aspects of Iran's behavior, such as Iran's regional policy. But now with the questioning of the JCPOA under the Trump administration, we very much see a return to the previous American stance on Iran, which had never been successful from the first place. And I think it's very important to understand how many of the conflicts that we do see in the region, and the driver really does come back down to the larger confrontation between the United States and Iran. And here it's important that we have a proper understanding of Iranian strategy and the Iranian position in the Middle East. Unfortunately, at times we hear words such as, the Persian Empire, we hear the words hegemon, but that's really not, the Iranian strategy. Iran makes use of opportunities, not of its own creations, whether we see vacuums of power created as a result of US wars with Iraq or Afghanistan, the erosion of Arab state systems, post-Arab Spring, civil wars, etc. Iran makes, best use of these opportunities presented to it to pursue both deterrent strategies, from its own perceived security threats and existential security threats, going to the long-term policy of regime change pursued by the United States, and counter-containment policies, as well as support for cheap asymmetrical groups, popular local armed movements that Iran supports who have been dispossessed from the regional architecture. So in some ways, in the context of an eroding Arab state system, where this US-Iran rivalry is taking shape, Iran has carved out its own security framework to ensure costs on what it sees as its own adversaries in case of potential attack on Iran. And the problem now that this becomes, we may enter in very risky and dangerous territory, is that the nuclear deal was perhaps one of the main benefits of the nuclear deal was potential confidence building measure of trying to establish some type of minimum trust or working relationship, not just between Iran and world powers, but particularly between Iran and the United States, whereas President Obama said, Iran and Saudi have to share the region and learn how to share the region. By undermining that agreement, even if Trump doesn't pull out May 12th, even if there is another short-term extension, the very undermining of the agreement, questioning its importance, has shifted attitudes quite significantly in Tehran to really becoming pessimistic about the benefits of the nuclear deal and the benefits of engaging and reaching out to the United States. That will harden the Iranian position. And then thinking about in terms of potential escalations moving into the future, thinking about how Iran will double down on its regional foreign policy, and we'll see potentially escalation in these various conflict zones throughout the region. And of course, in what one could say was what had brought the US and Iran to the table to negotiate from the very beginning, as in the United States had not been successful in that pushback policy and that containment strategy with Iran. So we're going back to that same strategy in a context where Iran does have an upper hand, in a context where Iran is much more adept at brinkmanship than other regional countries, such as Saudi Arabia, and can bear the costs of that brinkmanship much more adeptly than other countries in the region, which again makes it a very volatile and risky situation for all parties involved.